Next witness on the stand, please. Has this witness been sworn? Did I swear you in? Go ahead and have a seat over here, sir. Members of the jury, when you come into the courtroom, you may immediately take your seats. Okay, everybody's standing out of respect for you. Please call your next witness.
State calls Brent Downing. Officer, good afternoon.
Yeah.
If you would, please, first off, let me let you know we're using the microphone system today, so if you would, make sure you speak into the microphone. But if you would, please introduce yourself to the jury.
And excuse me. My name is Officer Brent Downing. I'm a peace officer with the City of Frisco, Texas.
And where are you from originally?
Originally, I was born and raised in Southern California, and then moved to Texas in 1998 with my parents. Went to high school, where I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 2002.
And how long did you serve in the Marine Corps?
I'm still currently serving. I've been in the Marine Corps between active duty and reserve time for 19 years.
How long have you been with the Frisco Police Department?
Approximately 7 years.
And in that employment with Frisco Police Department, what different roles have you performed there at Frisco?
Upon completion of police academy, went into becoming a regular officer, working regular patrol shifts. As I built seniority at the department, I became a member of the tactical team, the SWAT team, and currently I'm working on the department's deployment team, which focuses on high crime area within the city.
I want to focus a little bit on your work with the tactical team, with the SWAT team. If you could, is that a full-time assignment, or is that something you do in addition to your other duties?
The SWAT team at the Frisco Police Department is currently a part-time team, meaning we train once every 2 weeks. And then how does that work as far as if something happens within your city that requires a SWAT response? How are you notified and how do you respond? Typically what happens if we're not already on duty, we have a paging system with the police department. So a page will go out to all the involved parties that are a part of the SWAT team, at which point we're to respond to the police department as soon as possible.
Taking you back to March 29th of 2019, do you remember having a SWAT call out on that day?
I do.
Where were you that day when you got that call out?
I was actually in this building. I was taking part in a DWI, driving while intoxicated, report writing class when I received that page from the police department to report to the PD.
And did you do so?
Yes, I did.
When you respond back to the police department on a SWAT call out, what do you do next?
Upon arriving at the police department, you start putting on your uniform, getting your gear ready and on. Once everything is set, then you will go into a small room, which is our PD range, and at that point we'll get briefed on the situation and what's at hand.
And was that done on March 29th of 2019?
Yes, it was.
At some point, did you transport yourself, your team, to the La Valencia apartments?
At some point, upon completion of briefing, I loaded up into an armored personnel carrier, and then we drove over there to the location.
What was your team's assignment that day?
Upon arrival, we got briefed again on scene, and then we were to make movement to a location where a trooper was involved in a shooting, and the suspect was believed to have fled into an apartment room at that apartment complex.
And so you knew or at least at that point, you didn't know. You knew that it was believed that the defendant was in a certain apartment, and you all had to respond to that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Where was your team positioned with regards to that apartment that day?
We made our way around the south end of the apartment complex, utilizing as many buildings as possible as cover, moving up to the location where the believed shooting had taken place.
And were you actually kind of on that landing area outside of the apartment where they believed him to be?
Yes, we would eventually move into that location, going up a stairwell onto a landing just outside the suspect's apartment.
And then did you get a special job requested of you at that point there on that landing?
Yes, I did.
What was your response, or what were you asked to do while your team was positioned on that landing?
After being outside the apartment for an extended period of time, nothing was going on. We didn't know if the suspect had bled out. We had seen blood, so we didn't know if he had passed away inside his apartment. There was nothing going on. There was no sound. So the call was made that we were going to begin introducing gas inside the building, and the only way to do that was through the window. Being one of the taller members of the SWAT team, we had a long pole called a break and rake. And actually, it was a bang pole where we can attach a flashbang to the end. It's probably the longest piece of equipment that we had available at the time. And I was tasked with breaking the window from the outside, but in order to do so, I had to lean over a railing right there on the catwalk there and expose myself to get this window broken. That was the only way we could get access into this building because the door was shut.
And so the jury's heard a little bit of the terms cover and concealment. When you tried to use the piece of equipment to break open that window, you did not have cover or concealment. Is that correct?
Not initially, no. I had to expose myself to see where exactly the pole could reach and to try to break that window and make a breach so that we could get an opening big enough to introduce gas inside that apartment.
And how well did that attempt work as far as using that piece of equipment to try to get that window broken and open?
It was extremely difficult. It obviously wasn't exactly what that particular tool was designed for, but again, it was the best thing we had available to do. As I began to try to break that window, the bang pole itself started to get hung up on the actual window itself, which prompted me to try to maneuver it to try to get through, to continue that task of getting through that window and breaking those blinds and getting everything out of the way so that we could get that gas into the building.
And while you were executing that operation, did you hear shots, or were shots being fired in your direction?
Yes. So as soon as I started to break the window, at one point, I started hearing gunshots. I could feel some vibration of the actual pole itself. So I'm not sure if rounds were actually hitting the actual pole or if it was hitting parts of the window as they were going through the window. But I knew very well that the individual inside that building was definitely alive, and he was shooting outside it towards the direction of me trying to break that window.
And Officer Downing, you mentioned you still serve in the Marine Corps. Have you been deployed?
I have.
And have you been shot at before?
Yes, I have.
And did you recognize what you were observing that day to be shots being fired in your direction?
100%. Okay. No question.
Now, I don't know, were you aware that there were other officers kind of in that area with the long guns at that time trained on that window while you were out there trying to break it?
I was aware that there was a perimeter set on the exterior. There was also our SWAT team snipers out there as well. So I was aware that there was a perimeter around the actual apartment itself.
And now you've told the jury you and I don't remember what you said, you felt or you heard, but whatever, you knew that shots were being fired from the apartment towards you. After you observing that, did you communicate that with your team?
I did.
While the shots were coming out the window, at one point I turned around to Sergeant Cahill, who is the team member who's in charge of our particular team at that time, and I told him I felt that one I felt that one go past my face. At that point, he directed me to just drop the bang pole because it was hung up in the window at that point.
Okay. So you're trying to break the window, and initially you observed shots being fired out of that window towards your direction. In response to that, someone on a long gun returns fire towards that apartment, not a member of one of your team. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And at that point, the decision is made, hey, this is a little too hairy. Let's pull back and come up with a new plan.
That's correct.
Okay. Approach, Your Honor. Officer, previous to your testimony, were you able to see what's been marked as States 352 and watch that with me?
Yes, I have.
And does that accurately and fairly depict what was going on that day?
Yes, it does.
Okay. We'll offer States 352 at this time.
No objection.
States 352 is admitted.
Permission to publish, Your Honor.
Granted.
Now, Officer Downey, you're aware that drones were being deployed during this operation as well, is that correct?
Yes, it was.
And States 352 is actually is drone video of you out there trying to perform this window break when those shots were being fired, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, and we see this initial, you kind of stop, it looks like your head turns. Is that the initial out the apartment, being shot at, and you decide to keep going forward?
Yes.
And we also could see some of your teammates drop to a knee on their long guns focused on the apartment. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then something happens right there, and we'll watch it again, but then something happens right there, and not only is your attention, you move back, but the drone actually flips and starts moving out of the way. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right there, just so I don't have to try to do this again, because obviously it's not working great. But right there in the very bottom right corner of States Exhibit 352, as we move forward, do you see that highway patrol vehicle?
Yes.
And can you? I don't know if you can or not, but can you make out that the person on the left corner there is actually DPS trooper with a long gun and not a Frisco police? Can you see that it's brown uniform instead of blue?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And those are all the questions I have for you. Thank you. Ross?
Real quick, from the time you got the call while you were at the courthouse until the time you arrived at the scene at the La Valencia Apartments, you got a informed guess about how long that was?
Oh, I couldn't recall at this time.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
The witness released or reserved?
Released by the state, Judge.
The officer's excused.
Sir, you are released from the rule. You can stay or go, whatever you'd like to do.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Officer Winter.
Sir, please step through and have a seat over here in the witness stand.
My name is Roy Maxwell Winter. I'm a detective with Frisco Police Department. Denton, Texas.
What did you do after high school?
I joined the Army while I was in high school and went and served there for 5 years. Got out of the Army in 2009 and went to college working towards a bachelor degree in biology, working at Bass Pro, and then got tired of academics and hired on with Frisco PD.
Just stuck with Bass Pro.
I worked at Bass Pro.
Fair enough. How long have you been at Frisco?
About 9 years.
And what different roles have you had within those 9 years at Frisco?
In patrol, I was a field training officer. I promoted to corporal while I was there. I became a firearms instructor, patrol rifle instructor. I joined Frisco PD's SWAT team about 6 years ago. Since being there, I became a less lethal operator. I was in charge of type of gas munitions and things like that. From there, I went on to be a member of the team sniper team. Remained there for about 4 years. Then when we got an explosive breaching program, I helped bring that breaching program up, and now I serve part-time on the sniper team and full-time on the entry team as an explosive breacher.
What was your role with regards to your SWAT team on March 29th of 2019?
I was a member of the sniper team that was positioned in the front portion of the apartment complex. We were positioned right in front of the main face of the apartment complex building in our armored rescue vehicle.
What's been marked as states 354 and 355. Seen those previously. Are those both fair and accurate depictions of the events of March 29th?
Yes.
We'll offer 354 and 355 at this time.
No objection to either exhibit.
States 354 and 355 are admitted.
All right. Detective, when we look at states 354, overall, what are we looking at here in 354?
That appears to be when we were staging and first got on scene, that the large green vehicle in the lower left portion is going to be our armored rescue vehicle. That's the vehicle that we remained in the front of the building with. If you look on the rooftop, you can kind of see the circular hatch, and that's a little turret where it has an armored portion that raises up, and it allows us, as a sniper team, to have a covered position that's a little bit more resistant to gunfire that we can observe from.
And that day or did you have another team member named Ken Wang?
Yes.
Okay. He was on your team. He was also deployed in the same vehicle?
Yes.
Okay. Looking at States Exhibit 355, where we see the red and blues, the lights to the right of the picture, is that where your APC was positioned that evening?
Yes, it was.
Okay. While you were operating as a SWAT member, operating as a Frisco police officer during this standoff, and located at that APC, did you observe gunfire being directed at Officer Wang's location?
Yes.
Can you tell the members of the jury, how did you know that was directed at your location?
Well, me and my sniper partner, we swap back and forth of being the one that's currently behind a rifle and observing it to keep your kind of mental acuity up and your eyesight sharp. So I was on break at the time, and we were stretching our legs right behind the armored vehicle when more gunshots went off, and I observed a kind of a puff on the concrete next to me that I know from my military history was gunfire skipping off of the concrete.
Detective Winter, thank you. That's all the questions I have for you, sir.
this witness released or reserved?
Released by the state.
Released by the defense.
Sir, you are released from the rule. You're free to stay or go, whatever you'd like to do.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
They will call David Shanley.
Sir, could you please come up to this table? Raise your right hand for me, sir. Do you swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please have a seat.
If you would, please introduce yourself to the jury.
Hello, my name is Sergeant David Shanley. I'm crimes unit with the McKinney Police Department.
And Sarge, I'm already going to tell you, we're using the microphones. If you could, make sure you speak directly into it.
Sure.
Okay. If you would, tell us where you're from.
Born and raised in Northeast New Jersey, kind of near New York City, Meadowlands area. And then you want to go to...
Well, I'd love to know how you got here.
In 1997, I joined the Army. Spent about 6 years in the U.S. Army as a military police officer. Moved back to New Jersey, and a buddy of mine was a police officer down here in Bedford. Urged me to come down here to Texas. So about 2003, down here to become a police officer in the city of Bedford.
How long were you with Bedford PD?
I was with Bedford for about 4 years. So saw that there was a little bit more opportunity up here in McKinney. So in about 2008, moved up to McKinney and been here since for about 13 years now.
So you had military police experience, Bedford for 4, and now 13 at McKinney.
Yes, sir.
And what different roles have you played at McKinney PD?
McKinney PD, I've been a patrol officer, patrol corporal, patrol sergeant, SWAT operator, SWAT team leader, and currently I'm a supervisor of our Crimes Against Children's unit.
And Sarge, I'm going to ask you, can you pull the mic? Does that thing move for you?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, because you're cutting in and out even for me.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I want to take you back to March 29th of 2019.
Sure.
Do you remember what you were doing that day?
Yes. I was doing an investigation on a physical abuse case. Detective Craven, another detective that worked for me, he and I had to go to a hospital in Dallas to follow up on that. So we're in Dallas and we're coming back on that case, and that's when I heard the radio chatter over the shooting that was going on in Frisco.
Okay. Is that common while y'all are out to have the radio on to where you can pick up on what's going on in the area?
Yep. Yes, sir.
When you heard the radio traffic, did that mean, okay, well, we got to go up to Frisco. There's a shooting going on.
No. I checked in with our SWAT commander. At that point, there was no request for mutual aid for McKinney at that point. So we just went on with a just regular, just daily routine.
Now, if you would, have you heard the term I think like a self-reporting to a shooting?
Self-dispatch?
Self-dispatch, that's what I was looking for. Have you heard of that term before?
Yep.
What does that mean? If you would tell the jury what self-dispatch is.
Self-dispatch would, which occurred in this incident, you'll have, anytime you hear a shooting that's going on with a police officer, a major incident like this, you'll have FBI, DPS, Plano, just different agencies will just self-dispatch. They'll just show up on scene to render whatever kind of assistance they need.
And I mean, in some of these times, I mean, you'll have a patrol officer in their squad car. They're in the area. They may be showing up and saying, "Hey, how can I help?"
Correct.
And that happened in this case on March 29th, 2019, right?
Sir.
I mean, we had people from all over the surrounding cities show up to that scene offering assistance if needed.
Yep.
Okay, great. Did McKinney SWAT end up being asked to be on that scene?
We did. Our team leader, Carl Rogers, had reached out to Lieutenant Bryan Moore, who's the, I don't know if he's the commander or team leader for Frisco SWAT, and said, hey, we're available if you need us. And so it was probably about 1:30 in the morning where I got the call saying, hey, Frisco's requesting us to assist because the standoff had gone on for so long.
And is McKinney and Frisco, or do y'all have a relationship as far as y'all SWAT teams? I don't know the right term, but just to where y'all work together and y'all are kind of sister agencies.
I would say we don't train together necessarily, but we'll have quarterly team leader meetings where we'll get together and we'll go over topics that are pertinent to SWAT or to the area. So we have a good working relationship with them.
Do you remember what time you ended up getting your McKinney SWAT call out?
I think it was about 1:30 in the morning.
Okay.
But it was put out to us like, hey, there's no huge rush because there's plenty of help out there. So just get to the police department, the McKinney PD, get all your gear, get the armored trucks, and just kind of slowly head out to Frisco. And then once everybody's there, then we'll get situated.
Okay. And is that what you did?
We did. It was really to the point where there was no rush. So I think we stopped at a QT on the way out so guys could get some, food and drinks and stuff like that. And then we rolled on out to Frisco.
With a 1:30 call out, I would imagine there was probably a lot of Monster Energy drinks and a dip as well.
A lot of caffeine, yes, sir.
Fair enough. Most people don't know law enforcement runs on Monster and chewing tobacco often. All right, so you get to the PD. What happens next?
We get to McKinney PD. We get everybody. Once everybody is there, we made a concerted effort to try and only show up in 2 vehicles because we knew that the parking was going to be an issue there at that particular apartment complex with as many different agencies that had shown up. So once we got everybody at McKinney PD, we loaded up in both of our armored trucks and then drove out to made the quick stop at QT and then drove over to Frisco to the apartment complex.
Okay, so walk us through your team. Shows up at the apartment complex. What are the steps you go through so that you can now start to insert your teams into positions and help with that call out?
So we, myself and the other McKinney team leaders, we approached the command post, met with Lieutenant Bryan Moore from Frisco. There was also some FBI team leaders that were there. Had a conversation about who was, where we were going to go. Our snipers were going to relieve the FBI snipers. So there was a brief conversation, and it was ultimately determined that our team was going to relieve the FBI SWAT team that was already in the apartment complex, catty corner to the suspect.
Okay. Were you made aware of, in a briefing like that, are you going to want to know, hey, do we have someone who's firing or not?
Yes. At that point, when we showed up, I think that there had been a pretty good lull in the shots fired. So I think that I don't really remember the last time that there were shots fired, but we knew that there were throughout the day that there had been continuous gunfire.
Okay. What about, are you going to get briefed on whether or not any entry's been made, breaches have been executed, anything like that?
Yeah, yes, sir. We knew that the front door to the apartment complex had been breached. I'm trying to remember if it was before or after that we knew that the front door had been fortified. I don't really remember whether we knew that there was that big 2x4 that was on the door. I don't know if I knew that before or after, but I knew that the front door had been breached, and I knew that he was in a back bedroom with a closed door that had not been breached. But I knew that Frisco had robots in there that was, Frisco PD's robots were monitoring that door that was closed that he was behind.
Okay. And just so you know, the jury's going to hear from some other witnesses who will be able to walk us through some of the standoff and all of that. I want to focus on where your team ended up going.
Yes, sir.
So if you would explain to the jury where you ended up setting up your team in comparison to the defendant's apartment.
Okay, so when we I believe it was that third floor, we got escorted up there by one of the FBI team leaders. There were a couple FBI guys standing in the breezeway of the apartment complex. We wound up in an apartment that was, that's what I can say is catty corner to the suspect's apartment. So basically, if you looked out the door that we were in across the hallway, just at a little bit of an angle is where the suspect's door was.
Okay. And why don't you just set up right in front of that door and train your guns in?
We want to give ourselves as much space and time as possible. If in fact we do get in a gunfight, we prefer to have. Plus we had the robots in there, so we just want to give ourselves as much space and time and cover as possible in the event that we did get in a gunfight.
Okay. Now you mentioned the robots. So the robots that we're talking about in that apartment, do they have camera systems, most of them?
Yes. So Frisco has 2 robots that have arms on them. So they're arms. They have the ability to open doors. Unfortunately, the robot that we have does not have an arm. So basically, it's a little robot with tank tracks that has a camera on it. So you can just kind of drive it into the apartment and look. The reality, though, is nowadays with Wi-Fi signals, these robots they're some are, sometimes they're effective, sometimes they're not. So our robot, when we drove our robot into his apartment, we started losing signal. So we were trying to use Frisco's robots for some reason just had a better, they did a better job not losing signal. So we were trying to use theirs as long as possible.
Now, do you have, since your team is there catty corner to the defendants, did you actually have monitors showing you what was going on in the apartment, or how were you being made aware of what was being seen in the apartment?
So the robots have a handheld. I mean, it's just like a radio control car with a monitor on it. So Frisco had their robots in there, and they have just a little handheld device that they can monitor everything real time.
And was there anyone who was relaying what they were seeing to you and your team?
Yes. So Frisco was actually, they had 2 guys that were inside the apartment with us for, I don't remember how long. They eventually got cleared out because they'd been out there all day too. But once they left, we had our robot that started getting signal back. So we were able to kind of use our robot to watch the door also. But we had real time intelligence from their handheld device.
And I don't know that we've ever talked about this, but was there at that point, was there anything that you saw off the robot feed that was causing you any kind of concern up until that point?
No, not at that point. We just had the closed door. The main thing we were watching for is we just had concerns that door was going to open up and the suspect was going to come out, but the door stayed closed.
Let me ask you this: as a SWAT team leader, when you found out that they had to breach a door that had been barricaded with a 2x4 or whatever, did that raise your sense of awareness, or did that I don't know. I keep thinking of spidey sense. I don't know what the right term is, but just kind of up things a little bit as far as the way you were going to deal with the situation.
Yeah, I would say that was a little concerning, just because that's not typical in an apartment complex, that somebody would actually bolt something to the wall and then run a 2x4 through the, for extra security. I guess that was the main concern I had was just the gunfight that he'd been in, and then the constant shooting throughout the day, to a point where there were some tires that were inside the apartment, and I told my guys, stack these tires up because they had metal wheels in there. We were just trying to harden our location as much as possible.
I see you keep looking at the monitor. How about if I bring some pictures up there and we can start?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me show you what's been marked as states 347 through 350. Make sure those are accurate reflections of your observations that evening or that early morning.
Yes, this looks like the apartment we were in.
Okay. We'll offer states 347 to 350 at this time.
Take the witness on board, Your Honor.
You may.
Sergeant Shanley, these photographs are made in the apartment where you and the other SWAT team members were conducting your observation, right?
Yes, sir.
These are not photographs from inside the defendant's apartment.
No, I believe that's the apartment that we were in, just from the tires that the wheels that I could see in there.
All right, thank you. No further questions on board, and we have no objection to any of the exhibits.
All right, states 347 through 350 are admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective, now looking at State's Exhibit 347, is that the door? We can kind of see some tires back there. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So you've got your team in this apartment, catty corner to the defendants. You said that at this point he's behind a second door into in the apartment. Is that correct?
Deeper into his apartment, correct.
Okay. What's the big thing that happens next as far as interaction with this defendant?
The decision was made, I don't remember exactly what time, but the decision was made to use, I believe it was Plano PD has just a much larger robot that they could strap an explosive to and breach his door, basically use an explosive charge to blow that second door open to try and just to establish some kind of communication with him. So that was the next big step.
And was that executed? Was the Plano robot used to blow that second door?
Yes.
Okay. When that happened, what was the next thing as far as your team? Let me back up for a second because we didn't cover this. You had mentioned that when the Frisco robots and your robots were in there, you had the ability to watch monitors. With regards to the Plano robot, did you have real-time video with what was going on with the Plano robot?
No, so that was, we had another McKinney SWAT guy that was down there with the Plano robot operators, and he was relaying, hey, the robot's coming up, and I think there were some issues where they had to bring it back down. So there's some back and forth with their robot, but eventually that was all being relayed to us via radio.
In each SWAT team has its own radios and frequencies and stuff like that?
Correct.
Okay. So you had a member of your team actually in a separate location with the Plano robot operators and breachers relaying information to your team?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So once the door's blown, what was the first thing with regards to a response from the defendant?
I believe that the McKinney SWAT guy that was with the Plano robot, I think that he'd mentioned that the suspect was alive and communicating with them. I don't remember exactly what was said, but I do know that eventually he was willing to surrender and come crawling out.
And when that is made known to you, how then does your team react?
So our team, we stayed in our apartment. The decision was made that we weren't going to step out into the breezeway, that we were going to have the suspect crawl to us. We started, I personally started getting tourniquets and pressure dressings ready because we knew that he had some gunshot wounds. So we just basically started calling him, and he just crawled to us from the breezeway into our apartment.
Were you giving verbal commands to him on what to do?
Yes.
Was he responding to you either by doing what you were telling him to do, or were you actually having conversations with him?
No, my recollection is that the suspect would crawl on his back, and it was just a slow process. He's got some gunshot wounds, and then he's just slowly crawled to us. Then it would take a break, and then there was just a constant back and forth. Come on, keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. And there was a little bit of a delay when he got to the entryway to our apartment. That's where it slowed down a little bit. I think he was a little apprehensive to come in.
If you would, what was he saying to you at that point?
He looked at us and he said, "You're gonna fuck me up, aren't you?" And I had to show him, I had to actually show him the tourniquet and the pressure dressing and say, "Hey, no, we're gonna help you out. Just come on in." Well, and once he saw the pressure dressing and the tourniquet, I think he realized that we weren't going to do anything to him.
Okay. Do you remember anything about his speech? Was it normal? Did it seem delayed, slurred, anything like that?
It seemed lethargic and delayed to me. I thought he might be intoxicated.
Okay. Did you observe wounds on the suspect?
I remember him being very bloody. I don't remember exactly where the wounds were, just being about 2 years ago.
I got you. Was medical treatment given to the suspect after he went into that room where you had ordered him to? Was medical treatment given to him in a quick manner?
Yes, sir. I'd probably say within 10, 15 minutes. I think there was an element of either FBI or DPS came up, medics came up and rendered aid to him. We started putting pressure dressings on the wounds while we were taking him into custody, and then actual medics came up at that point.
Did you also have to make sure that he was safe for you guys to be around and wasn't carrying weapons at that time?
Yeah, that was the first priority. Yeah, just make sure that there's no guns or knives on him.
And looking at State's Exhibit number 348, was that the clothing that he was wearing that morning?
Yes.
Again, in 349, we start to see in 349, what are we looking at here?
Looks like inside the waistband holsters, 2 of them.
Does that look also like a knife?
Yes.
Looking at State's Exhibit number 350, is that a better image of those in the waistband holsters?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah, you can see the clips that kind of clip to the outside of the jeans.
And so the jury understands if you would, please describe to him what is an inside the waistband holster.
It's a type of holster that you can, instead of having my holster sits on the outside of my on a belt, and inside the waistband holster is a type of holster that you can tuck inside the waistband of your jeans or your pants, and it conceals the gun a little bit better. It doesn't print. It doesn't show through your shirt as much.
Do you remember what time, if you do, that standoff ended? Approximately.
I thought it was probably around 4 or 5 in the morning, somewhere around there.
Okay. Thank you, Detective. I'll pass the witness.
Ross?
All right, Sergeant Shanley, I just have a few questions. So you first heard of this while you were driving back from the hospital in Dallas in the form of radio chatter?
That's my recollection. I can't remember if it was radio chat or if there was a group message that was going around that there had been a shooting or that there was a gunfire. So I don't know. I do know that Zach Craven, who's the other SWAT guy that was with the robot, he and I were in the same car together, and I remember having a conversation about there was an incident involving a trooper.
Right, and you checked in with your own command to say, hey, are we supposed to go there? And they said, no, they haven't asked for us, just come on back.
Correct. We try, just McKinney PD, we try not to self-dispatch because it can become a really chaotic environment when everybody just shows up to the scene. So I do know that our commander checked in with Frisco and just said, hey, if you need us, we're available.
So what time was that when you first heard about it in the car on the way back from Dallas?
I think it was, I want to say it was, I hate to get incorrect times, but I thought it was maybe 4 p.m., something like that.
All right, so they didn't call you out actually until 1:30 a.m., right?
Correct. I was sound asleep in my bed when I got the,
that's like 8 or 9 hours later.
Correct.
And you've already gone home, you're off duty, not even working at the station.
Yes, sir.
All right. So then, since you were going there to relieve other SWAT units that were already on the scene, you didn't have to rush there super fast. You had time to get organized and get ready to go, right?
Correct.
Because you didn't know it might last another 9 hours.
Correct.
All right. So when you got there, again, to avoid flooding the command post with the whole SWAT team, you just sent 2 people up there to find out what's going on and what they wanted you to do.
It was about two or three of us, correct, yeah.
Now, you said continuous gunfire, but there was a lull going on. I want to explore that a little bit. To me, continuous gunfire means it's just bang, 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 one after another. Are you intending to leave with the jury the impression that it was just one shot after another for the whole 15 hours that this was going on?
No, I don't. This is information that was relayed to me, so while I was on scene, I never heard any gunfire, so I can't say that I heard it. It was relayed to me that there had been continuous gunfire throughout the day.
All right, but when you got, between the time you got there at 1:30 a.m. and the time that he surrendered at 4 or 5 a.m., you did not hear not one single gunshot?
Correct.
All right, so he didn't fire at y'all and you didn't fire back at him?
Correct.
All right. So there were 3 different robots employed in this incident?
Frisco had definitely one robot in there, and I think there was a rotation because the batteries, obviously, in a long standoff, you have to rotate batteries. So I think what Frisco was doing, I believe they had their one robot in there, and I think they were rotating, so I may have misspoken. I don't think it was 2 Frisco robots in there. I believe it was 1, and they were rotating it back and forth, and then we had introduced our robot into there.
So, I mean, by the time you get there, and the photograph shows it, it's dark, right?
Yes. Yeah,
do these robots, do they have low-light vision devices, or do they have lights? Well, how do they see in the dark?
No, they have lights, but the camera itself turns into not a FLIR, but it's I guess kind of like a infrared. You can see in the dark with these cameras.
All right, so you don't have to have a light on either in the apartment or on the robot. It has the technology that it can see in low light.
Correct. Yes, sir.
See, let's put that in quotes because it's a camera.
Right.
All right.
That's accurate.
Okay, so when Mr. Cahill, well, let me ask you this. The Plano robot used an explosive charge to breach that interior door, right?
Yes, sir.
And so you were there in that apartment observing that.
I was in the apartment, obviously not the suspect's apartment. I was or not in Mr. Cahill's apartment. I was catty corner, so we did see the Plano robot go past us and into the offender's apartment. All right,
yeah. So you were in that apartment that is pictured in States Exhibits 347, 348, 349, and 350.
Yes, sir.
Not in Mr. Cahill's apartment.
Correct.
So describe for the jury what happened when the
Plano robot enters his apartment. So, I mean, I guess are you able to see the robot come up the stairs?
I could hear the robot, because it's a much bigger, I mean, it's meant to, from my understanding, it's meant to dispose of ordnance. So it's a man-sized robot. And
because it's going to dispose of ordnance, it's also really heavily built, right?
Yes.
Because
I think that's, I don't know that I can testify to like the ins and outs of the robot, but it's a much bigger robot than what we have for the SWAT team.
Because it was designed to deal with ordnance. It might be in explosions, and if it's lightly built, it's going to be scattered to pieces, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you could hear it come up the stairs. Mm-hmm. Could you see it go into his apartment?
I eventually saw the robot pass in front of our door, and then we were staying. We hadn't, just as a TL, I didn't want to expose any of my guys into the breezeway, so we were outside of we had a guy with a shield, like a rifle-rated shield, a shield that can withstand rifle rounds. We only really had one or two guys that were kind of looking out into the breezeway, so I was inside of our apartment. So I only saw the robot drive past us and then disappear.
After it disappeared, how long was it before they fired the breaching charge?
It wasn't super quick. It was probably anywhere from like 3 to 5 minutes, because we were trying to, our robot would have signal, would lose signal, and our robot was kind of in the way. So we're trying to get our robot out of the way for Plano's robot to maneuver in front of his door. So it took a couple of minutes, and then everything has to be communicated through command. Hey, they're not just gonna, drive the robot in there and then just, breach the door by themselves. Everything is going to be kind of coordinated through command post.
Right. There's some, it's kind of a semi-military operation, right?
Yes, sir.
Because it has to be, because someone has to be in charge of it. You can't have. How many men were on the scene that night?
Probably over 50, I would imagine.
And so you can't have each guy making his own decision about what to do. There has to be somebody in charge that says, okay, now we're going to do this, do it, right?
Correct.
All right, so at some point the decision was made by the commander on scene, okay, we're going to fire this charge, and you knew that decision had been made because that command would have gone out on the radio net and all 50 men would be able to hear it, right?
Correct.
And so describe what happened when the commander gave the order to fire the breaching charge.
I think that there was a countdown, and then there was a command of, breach, something like that, and then the explosion went off inside Mr. Cahill's apartment and the door. And
you can hear it, right?
Yes, sir.
And does it also produce a bright flash when the charge goes off?
We didn't see the flash just because we were inside of an apartment, so I can't say that I saw a flash, but there was definitely a loud explosion.
All right, and did it break any windows? Did it rattle the doors? I'm not asking you to try to imitate it with your voice, but give us some feel for how loud it was.
It was loud. But you have to keep in mind that the breezeway is open to the outside elements. So I think that there was probably it wasn't nearly as violent or loud as it would be if you were contained within the apartment. So it was loud, but it wasn't one of the worst things I've ever heard.
Yeah, I get it. Was there any smoke after the detonation?
No, I don't remember any smoke.
All right.
I just remember just the explosion, just the audible sound of it.
So were you able to see through the sensors in the other robots, the cameras, what the effect was when the charge exploded?
No, because I'm kind of focused on my team. We've got one of our guys looking at our robot, but our robot, after we had moved it to allow the Plano robot to get in, we didn't have a great view of his door. So it really became communication between command and then Zach Craven, who was the guy that was with the Plano robot crew. So it was just relying on them to communicate what they were seeing with the Plano robot.
All right. So after the charge went off, how long was it before communication was established between
the officers and Mr. Cahill?
It felt pretty immediate. I felt like almost immediately there was communication with, that Mr. Cahill was ready to surrender.
All right. And was he communicating directly with you or with some other person?
I think he was talking to the robot, because he knew that I think that we were communicating through the robot because they have the ability to talk through the robot.
So the robot has a speaker on it,
correct,
right? And the robot has a microphone on it.
Mm-hmm.
So a person in proximity of the robot can hear what the robot is saying and can speak back to the robot.
That's my recollection. I believe that's the way it happened.
But of course, the robot is not saying anything. There's a person where the robot is being operated from who can hear what is being said because of the microphone and then speaks himself.
Correct. Yeah. Anything coming from the robot is a human on the other end of the controller.
And you do know or you do not know who that person was?
No, I don't know. I can't. I know that one of the McKinney SWAT guys was with the crew that was running, the Plano crew that was running the robot. I don't know exactly who was giving the commands, though.
All right. And so what you found out about that, you found out by radio relay. You had a member of your own team there where the Plano robot was being operated from, and they could communicate with you, okay, this is what's happening.
Yes, sir.
All right. So once communication was established, how long did it take for you personally to see the defendant?
Five minutes.
All right.
That may be a little bit long, but I think there was some dialogue back and forth between he and the crew on the robot, and then him eventually coming out to surrender in the breezeway. Right. But probably about 5 minutes.
And he didn't walk out there; he crawled. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And
he crawled on his back. Right?
That's my recollection, is that he was on his back.
I mean, of course, crawling is awkward at the best of times, but it's more awkward on your back than on your stomach. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
All right. And as he crawled towards you on his back, do you have any sense of how much time it took for him to crawl from his apartment to the place where you and the other officers were waiting to search him to see if he was armed, take him into custody, begin the process of treatment? How much time was that?
It wasn't incredibly long, but it was a couple of minutes. I mean, it was somebody who had gunshot wounds who probably was in pain, and that's probably why he was crawling so slowly. And
you indicated, I think, that he seemed fearful to you. He seemed intoxicated. He seemed lethargic. Did I have that right?
That was my perception.
All right. And why did you perceive him to be fearful? What did he say or do, or what that caused you to say he was fearful?
He looked at us, and I took it because he had been in a shootout with a Frisco officer that he thought that we were going to beat him up inside the apartment. So he communicated that to us, that he said, you guys are going to fuck me up, aren't you?
You assured him that you weren't going to do that.
Correct.
And you didn't do that, of course.
No.
All right.
Yes, sir.
And I think you also used the terms intoxicated and lethargic when you answered questions from Mr. Mitchell. Tell me more about why you used those words.
Just having been a cop for 17, 18 years, just having dealt with people that have either been on prescription medication or have, intoxicated. Just Mr. Cahill's speech and his slow speech, lethargic speech seemed like somebody that may have been taking some pills or had been drinking.
All right. I mean, you've been a policeman for 17 years. You've come across people who were drunk, right?
Yes.
People who were drunk who were driving cars, right?
Correct.
People who were drunk who were just out walking in the street. You can recognize when a person seems to be intoxicated.
That's correct. Yeah.
All right. So when you spoke to him and asked him questions, did he answer the questions that you asked?
I don't remember what question that we asked him. I knew that we were trying to get him in the apartment. I don't recall him not answering questions, but I also don't remember what we were asking him either.
Was his speech clear and easily understood, or was it kind of mumble-mouthed?
My recollection of his speech was just just kind of slow and lethargic. Like I said, his speech just appeared like somebody that had been either drinking or maybe taking some prescription medication.
All right, so he got into the apartment where you and your fellow officers were. You searched him to make sure that he was not armed. Now, those holsters that you found in the waistband of his pants, did they have weapons in them?
No.
All right, so they were holsters that could be used to contain weapons, but he didn't crawl toward you armed.
Correct. Yeah.
And the prosecutor also asked you about a knife sheath. There was a knife sheath there as well as the two holsters?
I believe so. I don't remember I don't remember the knife sheath per se, but I mean,
was there a knife?
No, there was no knife.
All right, so no firearms, no knife, no weapons of any kind.
Correct.
All right. So he got in there, you searched him, you made sure he had no weapons, you gave him first aid and took him into custody, and then the actual medics came up to give him more advanced treatment and to take him into custody.
That's correct.
And he went from the scene to the hospital, right?
What happened from the apartment to wherever Mr. Cahill went after that, I don't know.
Yeah, because your job was just to take him in custody and bring the situation to an end. You did that, and then it was time to clean up and go home.
Yes, sir.
All right, sir, no further questions.
This one is released.
Ask me if he's excused. He's excused.
Thank you, sir. You are released. You're free to stay or go, whatever you'd like to do.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Take a 10-minute recess. Members of the jury, please be back in the jury room in 10 minutes.
All right.
Recess for 10 minutes.
Sorry, sir. I know you would. There's no doubt of that. Shit, I would. How that robot?
And I'm wearing shorts and t-shirt. remind me never to ask you traffic.
To the front of the bench here. Right hand for me. Do you swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Have a seat. State, please call your next witness. Where is it? 93 is admitted. Granted. Has been sworn.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Simmons. I'm with the Texas Rangers, stationed in Hunt County, Texas. I've been with the Department of Public Safety for 25 years. Been in the Texas Rangers. This is my 14th year. I have a specialty in crime scene investigation, and I'm part of our Company B crime scene team, which is going to be my portion in this investigation. No, sir.
No one is started.
No, sir.
Where did you start with DPS?
With DPS, I started as a trooper in Canton, Texas for 4 years. Then I became a highway patrol sergeant in North Garland. And then I did 2 years in our criminal investigation division service, and then made Ranger in 2008.
And if you would, Ranger, explain to the jurors, what does it take to become a Texas Ranger?
We have to be part of the Department of Public Safety for at least 4 years. And then you also have to have, per the government code, 8 years of prior law enforcement. I didn't have prior law enforcement because I was a high school teacher prior to this. So I had to do 8 years with DPS prior to testing for Ranger. We have 160 rangers in the state, and we're all stationed throughout the state and have multiple counties for our jurisdiction. And mainly what we do is assist the local agencies with whatever kind of crimes they ask us to assist with. We also investigate any officer-involved shooting with anybody in the Department of Public Safety, as well as if other agencies request us to do that, we do that also.
I know you won't say it on your own accord, but quite frankly, within the DPS community, making Texas Ranger, there's only 160 spots, and that is a very coveted position that you earned yourself. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And so within the Texas Rangers, that's, y'all are called in when either one, agencies need help. You all have specialties, you have resources that agencies may not have, correct? Correct. You are also called in if there's an officer-involved shooting. That agency isn't going to investigate the actions of its own officer. We're going to call in the Texas Ranger as an impartial investigating body.
That's correct.
And in cases where a DPS trooper is involved, Texas Rangers may be called in for that type of investigation as well.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that you had a particular specialty with regards to your training experience, and tell me again what that was.
Yes, I have a specialty in crime scene investigation. I went to the National Forensics Academy in Tennessee for a 10-week training in forensics in 2008. We have another 3-week school of advanced crime scene that we do for all Rangers. I am now the lead instructor and coordinator for that school for the past 8 years. And then we also attend multiple other trainings with firearm trajectory, blood spatter, interview interrogation, pretty much anything to do with crime scene. We do multiple extra trainings per year.
And with regards to your area of operations, how many Rangers are generally assigned to one area of operation?
Just one.
Okay. So, we've heard DPS trooper tell the jury, look, I'm not like your police agency. I don't have a lot of backup. When we talk about a Texas Ranger, we're talking about even less. You one Ranger, one area.
Correct.
Okay. If you would tell the jury how you came to know about the shooting of a trooper on March 29th, 2019.
So we're broken up across the state. We're broken up into 6 companies. My company is Company B. Our headquarters is in Garland. And on in our company, we have 24 Rangers, 3 lieutenants, and a major. And then we have different specialties. In our crime scene, we do have a crime scene team within our company. And then we have a state Ranger crime scene team. We have about 7 or 8 Rangers on our company crime scene team. And anytime there's a large-scale shooting or a large-scale crime, we respond as the company crime scene unit. That way we can process the crime scene for the lead Ranger in that area, and that frees them up to go do interviews or warrants or whatever they need to do.
Do you remember about what time you got the call on this one?
I believe we got called out about 2:45 to 3. On the 29th.
On the 29th. Okay.
Yes.
And so what does that look like for you? You get the call, you're told this is what we've got going on in Frisco, Texas, and what do you do?
I was in Greenville, which I was in my regular uniform. They told us a little bit about what we had. So I went home and changed we have more of a tactical type uniform that we use when we're processing crime scenes, so that if you have a lot of biohazards or something, then you're not in your regular gear. And then I had to go to Garland to pick up our scanner. We have a digital 360 scanner, and then I reported to the scene.
Were you alone in traveling to Frisco? Okay. So what happens when you get to a scene in a case like this? What do you do? What's first?
Normally in a scene, we meet with our crime scene team lead, and then he starts dividing up different jobs for each of us, depending on how many come. In this case, when we arrived, The defendant was still at large or barricaded, and we were not able to start processing the scene, and so we were told to just stand by there until things were safe to process the scene.
So you were there pretty early on. Y'all were on standby until the defendant was taken into custody. The scene was made clear.
Yes, we remained on scene all night up by the office, so we weren't far away, but we could still hear things, but we were offset. And then I think around 5 or 6 in the morning is when they told us it was clear.
On that scene, before we start getting into the particulars of it, were there anything about that scene that made your job a little bit more difficult?
Well, when we first started out, it was still dark, and that's when one of our rangers would start photographing. As soon as he finished photographing and we started a process, it began raining. And then on the inside of the apartment, there was a lot of gas that had been put into the apartment, so we had to deal with that issue.
That Saturday morning, it was rainy and it was very windy. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. How many scenes? And I get that the apartment complex is one big scene, but if you were to break it up into scenes, about how many scenes did you have out there that day?
Probably about 4. We had the outside and the parking lot scene, and then we had a different section where we found the first 2 pieces of evidence from the parking lot to another building, and then we actually had the apartment of the defendant, and then there was another apartment that had some evidence to the back of that one.
So then how do you process a scene that big? Take us big picture to kind of how you did it, and then, we'll end up getting to what was found, and we'll go through the pictures. But if you could, just kind of take us a big picture of how you process a scene that size.
Okay, so it was pouring down rain. We have a crime scene trailer is what we call it, and it's just mainly a trailer that we have some tables and chairs in. It's got a little awning. So we set that up. One of our rangers became the photographer, so he went around and he started taking photographs of the entire scene. We always photograph everything as is prior to doing any processing. Then several of us, when it started raining, we started just putting markers down. So we went through the scene and everything we could see, started putting markers down on the outside area, and then we went back through a second time after we put those down and found some more. That's when we started really moving leaves and looking where the wind might have blown stuff, and then we started putting more markers down. And then once we finished the outside scene and then the building to the east, then we went to the apartment later that afternoon.
Is it fair to describe the amount of evidence in this case that you had to process, as a very large amount?
Yes.
Okay. Permission to approach, Your Honor.
Granted.
Right here, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 18. Is that the diagram of the scene and where you collected some of your evidence out there in that parking lot?
Yes.
Not drawn to scale?
No, correct.
We'll offer State's Exhibit number 18 at this time.
No objection.
State's 18 is admitted.
And Judge, I want to ask for permission to move back and forth as we go through this round of evidence.
That's fine.
Ranger said we've got a we've got a lot of evidence in this case. As we go through it, I think you and I have agreed the best way is not to go individually and pull out every single piece of evidence as we go.
Correct. We'll be all here all night.
All right. So to save us from being here all night, have you had a chance to look at what's been previously marked, and even on the break before now, with State's Exhibits 20 through 114, which are in this area kind of in front of you? We've gone through there and opened all that up. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, Your Honor, we'll offer States 20 through 114 previously tendered to the defense.
I take the witness on board, Your Honor.
Yes.
Ranger Simmons, you described kind of 4 sub-scenes. This block of exhibits 20 through 114, which of those sub-scenes did this come from?
Can you show me which numbers? I've got different numbers, so.
It will be your items 1 through 99.
The 1 through 99 would just be the outdoor scene, so I'd probably be one of the scenes.
So that's like the parking lot, right?
The parking lot to the north of Building 4, yes, sir.
All right, is that where the initial exchange of gunfire took place?
Yes, sir.
All right. That's all the questions we have on voir dire. No objection to any of the exhibits.
Right, States 20 to 114 are admitted.
And Judge, I apologize. It's actually 19.
Excuse me, 19 through 114 are admitted.
Still no objection, 19 through 114.
So, Ranger Simmons, what we're going to do, I think what you told me was probably going to be the easiest, is we talk about those exhibits, kind of going through pictures of them and pictures of that area that we're describing as the outdoor scene. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then after that, then we can go to the next scene and kind of work our way through the evidence. Is that correct?
Correct.
Let me show you what's been marked as State's Exhibits 152, all encompassing to 267. You've had a chance to look at those prior to this, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll offer State, and they fairly and accurately reflect the state of that evidence collection and the evidence you collected in this case.
Yes, they do.
We'll offer States 152 to 267 at this time.
Couple questions on voir dire.
Sure.
So these pictures, 152 through 167, through 267, they show us where the physical items 19 through 114 were found.
Correct.
Nothing else on voir dire, no objection to the exhibit.
152, States 152 through 7?
152 through 267, yes, Your Honor.
They're admitted.
All right, Ranger Simmons. All right, States 152, what are we looking at here?
This is the parking lot, Building 4, which is the building the defendant lived in, is up here on the corner here. And then that would be his vehicle, and then the trooper's Tahoe is right back behind it in the parking lot area.
And as is there a process to documenting a scene through photographs?
Yes, so our photographer, whoever is assigned as photographer, we go through the first time, we take overall photos at larger scale prior to marking any evidence, and we take them from all the different locations. And then once we mark evidence, we come back and take same photographs, and then we move in closer where you can start seeing where items of evidence are found, and then we take individual photographs of each evidentiary with that placard number.
So as we go, the jury can kind of see where we're talking about. On State's Exhibit 18, we see know a good place to set there, but, does that interfere with your ability to? When we look at State's Exhibit 18, the blue square furthest to the left, that's going to represent that green Firebird.
Yes, correct.
Then there's two squares above those. We got two, what look like Nissan Altimas right there, a white one and a black one.
Yes.
State's 152. Down at the bottom, we've got a white, looks like a hatchback.
Yes.
And then the furthest right blue box, that's going to be our trooper's vehicle.
Correct.
We're going to show this stuff. We don't need the jury to
Okay.
understand which numbers are which on there. Is
Okay.
that correct?
Yes.
All right. All right. So getting a picture of what it looked like at the scene that day, 152. What are we seeing in 153?
That's just a photo of the left side of the trooper's vehicle.
154, we work our way around. And then what do we see in 155?
That would be the defendant's vehicle.
156.
Same defendant's vehicle.
157.
That would be the defendant's vehicle with a shotgun located.
So now we're kind of getting to that other side of it. What are we looking at in 158?
This was just showing the front of the trooper's vehicle with the defects in it.
Since we have it up on 158, see a defect right where the trooper would be sitting in his vehicle?
Yes.
All right, now, looking at State's 159, so we're oriented, we see the trooper's vehicle, we see the scene. What are we looking at on the ground in 159?
So those are just our evidence placards. So whenever we just have 1 through 100 of those tents, and then we start placing them down anywhere we see something that would be noted as evidence.
And from this vantage point, do you know what building we're looking out from?
We're looking out from Building 6.
Okay. So this is Building 6 looking out, and what we see in front of us is Building 4.
Yes, correct.
Where the defendant resided.
Yes.
Now what are we looking at in State's 160, where we see those evidence placards again?
That is Building 6.
All right. 161, we see evidence placards all the way up to the defendant's apartment.
Yes.
There was evidence in front of that Firebird as well, correct?
Yes.
All right. So let's start with and what I'll do if it works for you is I'll say the State's exhibit number if you'll tell us what it is we're looking at.
Okay.
All right. So State's 163, what do we got there?
That is shotgun wadding.
Do you feel comfortable telling the jury what shotgun wadding is, or would you rather wait?
It's a component of a shot shell. So when you have a shotgun shell and you fire it, that's a piece that's inside that gets shot out along with the projectile part.
And when we, just so that we're oriented again, when you saw those individual placards being kind of, we're talking about number 1 in front of building number 6. Is that where we found that shotgun wad?
Yes.
Correct? Okay. Then working our way, number 2, what's that?
A bullet.
Number 3, what's that?
Wadding. Shot shell wadding.
When we start looking into number 4?
4 is going to be a Hornady 9mm cartridge case.
6?
6 is a Hornady 9mm cartridge case. Is a Hornady 9mm cartridge case.
I'm sorry, let me be referring to the exhibits like I should be. 169.
Right, a Hornady 9mm cartridge case.
70?
The Hornady 9mm cartridge case. Hornady 9mm cartridge case.
That's on 171. 172.
Hornady 9mm cartridge case.
73.
Hornady 9mm cartridge case.
174.
Hornady 9mm cartridge case.
and to save us a little bit of time, 175, 176, and 177, what are all they?
They're all Hornady 9mm cartridge case.
When we look at 178, what is that?
That is a 6-hour 9mm magazine that's empty.
That's empty.
Yes.
Okay. Number 19, what is that?
That's another 6-hour 9mm magazine that's empty.
Okay, and you're aware in this case, our trooper had 3 6-hour magazines, you found 2 empty?
Correct.
Looking at states 180, 181, when we go to states 182, where was the location of your items 22 through 24?
Those were under the black Nissan Altima.
Okay. So in states 18, we're starting to talk about this blue square on the top. We've got more cartridge casings, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
States 183, what is that?
That would be the trooper's hat.
184?
That's a black Chevrolet key.
$185 and $186, what are those?
Hornady 9mm cartridge case.
What do we see in 187, your item 29?
Projectile.
Then as we look, and I think we've put these together, when we look at 188, we start to see your items 30 through 36. Location on the top of on the troops squad, is that correct?
Yes.
And what are your items 30 through 36?
They're all Hornady 9mm cartridge cases.
And just so the jury's clear, so that you know, because I know we're moving through this kind of fast. Firearms evidence that you collect out of scene, what do you do with that?
I package it and immediately we send it to the firearms examiners.
Okay, so the jury can expect that all of this firearms evidence that we're going through kind of quickly right now was sent to a lab. There's examined by our firearms examiner, and that we can listen to a firearms examiner kind of talk to us about the importance of what was found, matching it to weapons and stuff like that.
Correct.
Okay, all right. All right. Your item number 37 in states 189, what is that?
It's a Remington 223 cartridge case.
And you're aware that DPS Trooper Michael Herring fired his Bushmaster 223 at the window at one point during the standoff. Is that correct?
Yes.
States Exhibit 190.
It's a projectile.
191.
That one was a fragment.
And 192.
To be a projectile.
Okay, and if I go back to states 188, we see a trooper standing there holding a placard number 40. 192 is a close-up of that projectile, is that correct?
Yes, it was stuck in between where the hood meets the front bumper area.
Your markers 41 and 42, what are those?
Those are also Hornady 9mm cartridge cases.
43?
Projectile.
What do we have in states 196, your marker 44?
That is a fired 12-gauge shot shell.
197, what is that?
That is an unfired 12-gauge shot shell.
198?
That one is a fired 12-gauge shot shell.
And then when we see States Exhibit 199, what is that?
That is a federal 40 caliber cartridge case.
Okay, now we haven't heard 40 caliber yet. That
Correct.
is 40 caliber different than 9mm?
Yes.
All right. When we look at 47, we spent a lot of time in this area. Now we're over on this side. Is that correct? By the defendant's car?
Yes.
Okay. So when we see 44, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, we're now talking about a .40 caliber casing, is that correct?
Correct.
And the troop did not carry a .40 cal?
No, sir, he carried 9mm.
States 200, what is that?
That is a projectile.
201?
Projectile.
I'm going to move through these a little bit quicker now as we're going. 202?
That's a projectile.
203, 204, 205, 206. 207 looks like we're starting to get by the stairs.
Yes, those are projectiles and then fragments of projectiles.
208 and 209.
Yes, projectiles and fragments.
In 210, what is that?
That is a federal .40 caliber cartridge case.
And 59.
That is it's UNDRWD, and it's a cartridge case.
Okay. What caliber cartridge case is that?
I believe it's a .40 also.
I'm sorry, 60?
That is a federal .40 caliber cartridge case.
61?
Federal .40 caliber cartridge case.
What is 62?
It's a fragment of a projectile.
Three?
Federal .40 caliber cartridge case.
64, 65, 66.
Those are all federal .40 caliber cartridge case.
68, 69, 70.
Those are all federal .40 caliber cartridge cases. So 71, and you have a projectile fragment.
72.
It was a black knob that we found.
Okay, so no firearm significance in that.
No.
73?
Projectile.
74.
Fragment.
What do we have in 75?
That is a Glock 22 .40 caliber semi-automatic pistol.
Your Honor, this next exhibit has been cleared by the bailiff. I want to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 90. Is that firearm you collected and that we see in State's 227?
Yes.
We'll offer State's 90 at this point.
Objection.
State's 90 is admitted.
And if you would, can you tell the jury what model number State's Exhibit 90 is?
Glock 22.
What caliber?
.40 caliber.
.76.
That is a fired 12-gauge shot shell.
77.
Fragment.
8.
78 was fragments.
So the State's 231, 32, 233.
Those are all fragments from projectiles.
What do we see in State's Exhibit 234?
That is a Maverick M88 12-gauge shotgun.
Our State's Exhibit number 97 has been cleared by the bailiff. I'll show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 97. Is State's Exhibit number 97 exactly the Maverick 12-gauge that we see in State's 234?
Yes.
We'll offer State's 97 at this time.
No objection.
States 97 is admitted.
Wait, I thought that was States 234.
97's the shotgun, 230.
Oh, 234 is a picture, sorry.
States 82, located right in front of his car.
Yes.
States 235.
That's going to be a Hornady 9mm cartridge case.
36, 237, 38.
Are all Hornady 9mm cartridge cases.
And you had mentioned a second walkthrough where you start moving leads. Is this an example of the second walkthrough where we're finding more evidence?
Yes, correct.
So when we actually get to these, we're back now around the trooper's vehicle, behind the trooper's vehicle.
Yes.
In 239, we see your evidence markers 87 and 88. What were those?
Those are both fired 12-gauge shot shells.
240, we can kind of see where we're at in this. We're towards building number 4, kind of away from the vehicles. Looking at your evidence marker number 89, what is that?
That's a projectile.
Looking at 242, where should our eyes be looking there? Can you see?
I think right there in the, below the cap, silver cap.
Right in here, yellow circle, we see kind of something shiny. Is that right?
Yes.
Moving to 243, what was that? What was your number? I believe it was 89.
Projectile.
We can see that's in the Firebird in the engine block. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were you aware that there was a civilian who fired from an elevated position at the defendant in this case?
Not at the time, but heard later.
When we look at 244, what are we looking at in State's Exhibit number 244?
This is looking into the passenger door of the defendant's vehicle.
And Ranger Simmons, with as much as we worked on trying to get through that stuff quickly, we actually got through, with regards to what was found on the ground out there, we've gotten through all of those items that were found out on the ground out there. Is that correct?
Yes.
At this point? Okay. Looking at 244, we see the defendant's vehicle. From which side are we looking in, passenger or driver?
Passenger.
And closing in on that in 245, we can see the gear shift, and we see a bag there. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that black bag.
Okay. Was that taken into evidence?
Yes.
What was your marker on that one?
They marker number 99.
Did you have an opportunity to open up that bag and view its contents outside of the scene later?
Yes.
And is that what we see in States 246?
Yes.
If you would, tell the jury what you see in States 246.
There was multiple magazines and ammunition inside the bag.
Did you take pictures of, as is, we see it right there. Did you also take pictures of the ammunition and the magazines that were contained in that bag?
Yes.
Is that what we see in States 247?
Yes.
Do you remember or about how many shells or how many, live cartridges we found in 99?
I believe in the 2 extended magazines, there was 31 in each. And then the smaller ones, we had 12 in each. I believe.
All 12, 13, depending on which magazine,
Yes.
count-wise. And with regards to the ammunition, we have both hollow points and I'm going to say full metal jacket, but what a lot of us refer to as range bullets as well. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, Ranger, we talked about you having a scene with regards to Building 6, kind of considering that a separate scene. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so to orient ourselves, Case Exhibit 18 again. Right now, we're looking towards Building 6 behind the troops' vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we can actually see two of the markers are still there. 1 and 2 are in this picture.
Correct.
So when we look at what was found in this area, you're going to view that as a separate scene, different types of markers.
Yes, we only had markers 1 through 100 on the tents, and we had used those up, so we went to the letter markers in the separate scene.
Now, did you do the same thing with regards, or the photographer do the same thing with regards to trying to photograph the big picture, and then we started getting into the individual areas of interest? Is that correct?
Yes.
So Stage 248 shows it from the outside, Stage 249 a little bit closer. Is that right?
Yes.
And we can start to see windows on what looks like to be the second level.
Yes.
When we look even closer in Stage 250, what's that?
There's a defect right at the bottom of the windowsill.
So this is another apartment building. Yes.
Behind the trooper's vehicle. To the west.
Right.
I'm sorry, to the east.
The defendant firing from his position, we're talking about behind the trooper. Starting to see defects in that building.
Yes.
What do we see in 251?
251 was a defect through the metal railing outside of Building 6.
And I'm going to take us back for a second. 248, do you see the fence in that picture?
Yes.
All right. What we're talking about is a hole in a wrought iron fence. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right in front of somebody's apartment. Correct?
Yes.
252, what's that a picture of?
There was a defect into one of the windows of the apartment.
And what the jury sees here, tell me if I'm right, that hole in that wrought iron gate, your photographer's showing it with the defect back in a window behind it. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we saw marker E noting that defect in State's Exhibit number 252. Do you see that E denoting that same defect in State's 253?
Yes.
Now, what else do we see in State's 253?
We have another defect in the window to the south of it.
Okay, so now we're seeing two defects in somebody's window in an apartment in Building 6.
Yes.
State's 254, a better picture of those?
Yes.
What is State's 255?
So that's following the defect into the apartment. After it traveled through the window, then we believe it was in the same flight path with the one that marked C in the window. And so that would be the defect in the wall.
So 254, C, defect in someone's window, followed into 255, and we're noting damage into that drywall.
Correct.
256, that same flight pattern?
Yes.
What do we see in 257?
It struck they had a little art box up on that shelf, and it went into the art box.
And that was your collection number, I think you labeled it number 90, or was it C? Do you remember what that was?
I don't.
Number.
Yes, number 90.
Yes, what is that?
It's a projectile.
Labeled by you, I believe, lead fragment?
Yes, we believe it was from a shot shell.
258, a close-up of that lead fragment.
Yes.
259, what do we see there? D is a new number for us, or a new letter for us, is that right?
Yes, we had a defect in the lower sill.
All right, and then we also, now we're coming back and we see what's been marked as E, the hole in that window. C was the one on top, E is the one lower to it. What do we see in States 260?
We found a projectile, I think, located on the floor inside the apartment.
And the jury can see that little art box up top where one of the projectiles hit into somebody's apartment. Now we're looking at, that was C, now we're looking at E, I believe, on the floor there. Is that correct?
Correct.
What's that right there?
Projectile.
States 262. What is that?
That's another defect on the, I guess it'd be on the southwest corner.
Close up there in 263.
Defect in the corner of the building.
So, you know, we've talked a lot about building 4 because that's where the defendants found it. What we're talking about here is these are projectiles going into building 6. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
.264, your item 91. What was that?
I believe, let's see. That's going to be a fragment.
266, your item 92.
Fragment.
And 267, your item number 93.
Fragment.
And those are all fragments found around building number 6 in that apartment complex.
Yes.
So we've talked about the outdoor scene. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. You have your outdoor scene with your vehicles, you have building 6 as a scene. What was the next scene that you processed?
The defendant's apartment 431.
Marked as States Exhibit 268. Seen these before. These all pictures of either his apartment, a couple of the ones that McKinney SWAT was in, and the items taken off him at arrest.
Correct.
Those fairly and accurately reflect the scene you processed and the items you collected.
Yes.
We'll offer States 268 to 351.
No objection to any of those exhibits.
268 through 351?
Yes.
They're admitted.
And Ranger Simmons, just so the jury doesn't think we're being mean to them, there were thousands of photos taken of all these different scenes. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Looking at State's Exhibit 268, what is that a picture of?
That is the front door of the defendant's apartment, 431.
Were you aware, or did you become aware of a barricade that that the defendant had placed on that door that required a special type of breach?
Yes.
Looking at it, and again, the photographer does a good job taking pictures of this scene, the defendant's apartment, going through it as is so that we can get an idea of what it looks like, and then we go through and actually find the evidence. Is that correct?
Correct.
So as we start to move in, and in fact, even in 269, you can start to see part of that barricade on that right side of that door frame. Is that correct?
Yes.
We see the living room area of 270.
Yes.
271, 272, as we start to pan around in that living room. What are we looking at? Which way are we orienting in State's Exhibit 273?
The front door would be to your back, and that's facing the kitchen's to the left, and the bedroom is straight back. And then there's a little dining study area to the right.
Okay, so there we see that in 274 with what looks like kind of like a desk and alcohol bottles on top.
Yes.
As we move left from 276, what do we see there?
That's just outside the bedroom door. There's a little bar area.
And we can start to kind of see the kitchen area into 278.
Yes.
And in fact, when you went in and you took over that scene, you did not allow law enforcement to remove anything. Is that correct?
Correct. They can't move anything until we've processed evidence.
All right. So we actually see one of the, I don't know which one, but that's one of the robots. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. 279, looking into the kitchen.
Yes.
280, what is that?
We found knives located inside the refrigerator.
Moving to 281, what area of the apartment are we looking at now?
That's looking into the bedroom.
In 282, what in the world is that?
That was the large robot that went into the bedroom. We were unable to move that one out.
Needless to say, that is an extremely heavy duty device.
Yes.
Okay. So 282 is our first look kind of into that bedroom, and like you said, nothing was moved out, so we even see the Plano bomb robot.
Yes.
Looking at 283, which way are we looking now?
That's in the bedroom. You're standing by the door looking out toward the window, toward the front of the building.
284, the bed in that bedroom?
Yes.
285, coming around the side of, or the foot of the bed into 286.
That would be looking at the head of the bed, and there was a washing machine in there.
And then 287, water stacked up against the window, is that correct?
Yes.
289, can you tell us what those are on the floor there?
Which?
I'm sorry, 288.
About the medicine bottles and water bottles.
Those look like cough syrup bottles and packaging?
It could be, yes. $289, more of the foot of that bed. Now we're starting to see flashlights and... That's by the head of the bed?
I'm sorry, head of the bed. Then 290 looking back into that bedroom from the window, correct?
Yes. That would be the closet on the right, and then behind the door is a bathroom.
291, what is this a picture of?
I believe that's looking into the closet.
292, entering into the closet. What's that in 293? You know?
It looks like some kind of tactical gear, but I can't say exactly what it is.
All right, so now we go to 294. What are we starting to see now?
Now we're starting to put down the evidence markers.
Okay. Are you okay if we kind of do what we did in the last go round and we start moving through and you tell us what each one of your items was?
Yes.
Okay. What is that in number 1?
That's that UND RWD 9mm cartridge case.
Okay. Now, earlier you had mentioned, and I'm sorry, I can't repeat, UMD WD 9mm, right? We had seen one of that brand caliber out in the by the Firebird in the outdoor scene. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. 296. What is that?
That was an iPhone in a black case.
You recognize the Frisco throw phone?
Yes.
Where we see 24 missed calls and 9 messages, the last one being "talk to me."
Yes.
Do you know, was that ever returned to Frisco?
Yes, it was.
298.
That is, again, a UND RWD 9mm cartridge case.
Now, so that we're oriented, we see that little robot over to the left, so we're kind of going into that study area outside of the kitchen. Is that correct?
Yeah, right in front of that little bar area and kitchen entrance.
What's your number 4 in States 300?
That was a black 9mm magazine with 12 live rounds.
Number 5?
That was a black 9mm magazine with 11 live rounds.
And we see something kind of interesting kind of in the left corner of that picture. You know what that is?
I believe that's part of a drone. Maybe. Can't tell from the picture.
As we go, kind of see the round blade area of what looks like to be a drone.
Yes.
Going into 302, what room are we entering into here?
That's into the bedroom.
Your number 6 in States 303, what is that?
That's a Luger 9mm cartridge case.
Your number 7?
Luger 9mm cartridge case. Same Luger 9mm cartridge case.
And in 306, your number 9?
Luger 9mm cartridge case.
And these are all fired cartridge cases, right?
Yes.
307, number 10?
A Luger 9mm cartridge case.
308, number 11?
That is that UND RWD 9mm cartridge case.
Number 12. What do we have on number 12?
That was the Pro Mag. I think it's down below. It's kind of hard to see.
On the other side of that beer bottle, we've got a magazine.
Yes. It's a Pro Mag with 13 cartridges in it, live cartridges.
What do we see in States Exhibit 310?
That is a Taurus G2 9mm.
Now,
pistol.
What does it mean to you that the slide is back on what we see in States Exhibit number 310, your item 17?
Normally that would mean that everything was fired out of it. It was fired to empty, or there was some type of malfunction.
Do you make weapons safe before taking pictures of them, or?
No.
Okay, all right.
So, that's indicative of you back under drive.
Yes.
You said the 111? PT 111? Correct?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
Your number 17 was a PT 111, 9mm?
Taurus.
I'm sorry.
G2 9mm.
May I approach, Judge?
Yes.
Such, State Exhibit 141 has been cleared by the you 41. Ask if that's the same.
Yes.
We'll offer States 141 at this time.
No objection.
States 141 is admitted.
So that 9mm, by the time you got to it, had run dry.
Yes.
Moving to the foot of the bed area, States Exhibit 311, placards 13 and 14. 13.
13 was a UND RWD 9mm cartridge case, and then 14 was a Luger 9mm cartridge, so that was a live round.
314, States, or your Exhibit 15?
Luger 9mm cartridge case.
Looking at States 315, item 18.
That would be a Luger 9mm cartridge case.
Where are we at in States 315?
That's in the bathroom that's inside the bedroom, behind the bedroom door.
And in States 317, we notice, what is that? What do we see there?
That was tape on the ceiling. I didn't take the tape off, so I don't know what was under it. I think it was one of the air-conditioned vents, maybe.
And that's what I was going to ask you. Does it look like a vent being covered up by duct
yes.
tape? 318, what do we see there?
That would show 13 again. That's the UND RWD 9mm cartridge case.
I guess what I'm asking.
Oh, okay. Oh, and then the dresser that's in the bedroom on the far wall.
319, go into that dresser and open up that first drawer. What do we see there?
There was a lot of shot shells.
All right. We see shot shells. What is that to the right, that kind of box by the CDs? You recognize what that is?
I believe it was some type of ammo box.
You open up that ammo box, take pictures of what was in there.
Yes, well, Ranger Stoner would have, yes.
And that's what we see in 320.
Yes.
Taking those out, we see something called, or medication, we can see in 321. Bryan, we can see what's labeled as olanzapine. Is that correct?
Yes.
We haven't talked about this, so you can tell me you don't know, but do you have any idea what olanzapine is?
No, sir.
All right. 322, we see that bottle again, and then we see something from a company called Medical Core. It's called potassium iodate. You know what that is?
No, what potassium is, but I don't know what that would exactly be.
You were never trained for possible nuclear war in the military, were you?
No, sir.
323, what do we see there?
Some more prescription bottles for Mr. Cahill.
Bryan Cahill, we see lisinopril, HCTZ. You know what that is?
No, sir.
And olanzapine again, is that correct?
Correct.
324, we see more olanzapine prescriptions, correct?
Correct.
This time by a different doctor, all for Bryan Cahill.
Correct.
And again, same pictures. Now we've got 2 for olanzapine and 3 for olanzapine.
Yes.
There's a 1, 2, 3, and then carrying on 4, correct?
Correct.
All right. There's those shotgun shells in 327, is that correct?
Yes.
And once you pulled that stuff out, we had a couple more shotgun shells in 328.
Yes, and then the black box.
Gun box.
Gun box.
When you close the door into the bedroom, Did you find more evidence? Your marker 21.
Yes, it's a Luger 9mm cartridge case.
Now let's talk about some of the other observations you made, and I'm not going to ask, you're not here to testify with regards to trajectories and doing a scene reconstruction in this case. Is that correct?
No, sir.
Okay. But as far as, did you see bullet defects within that apartment when you walked through it?
Yes.
All right. Looking at States 331, we see, we're talking about the same apartment still, 431. What is that we see denoted by your ruler marker on that door?
I believe that's a bullet or defect in the door.
From the other side, States 332, same bullet defect.
Yes.
And as we look at that, a little bit better picture there. Now we get a better picture of the barricade that was put up against that door. Is that correct?
Yes.
.333, kind of in that study area behind that low wall. What are those that we see with the markers?
Those are going to be defects located through the wall.
So we've got 4 defects there. Is that correct?
Yes.
334, showing a rod. That one going into the couch. Is that right?
Yes. It just says a flight path.
336. Now we're in the living room. Another bullet defect.
Yes, going to the out front to the window, outside wall.
And we actually have one in the wall, and then we've got another one marked actually on the window. Is that right?
Yes.
See it right there in States 337.
Yes.
Outside that window, where we had men and women of law enforcement, correct?
Correct.
Looking back towards that study area in States Exhibit 338, what do we see on that wall?
Bullet defects in the wall.
Were you aware which one of those was Trooper Herring's shot into the apartment? Do you know?
I did not know.
As we go into the bedroom, States Exhibit number 339, between the bathroom and the closet, what are those that we see in the wall?
Defects in the wall.
340 going into 341, same thing, defects in the wall?
Yes.
And then maybe a little bit better view where you can actually see the placards on the wall there. It says 343, correct?
Yes.
Now as we move, this would be back to the foot of the bed to the left. We see the kind of alcohol. Now we're looking at another interior wall in 344. What are those?
Defects in the wall.
Bullet defects going into the apartment next to it. Is that correct?
Yes.
345 takes us back to the apartment where McKinney SWAT was set up. So I'm going to skip through those. The jury's seen that. What is 351? What do we find there?
Those were items that were removed out of the pockets of the clothes that were on the floor that were identified as his.
And
defendants.
I see a sharpening tool. What's that right next to it?
That's going to be a magazine.
And then
It had 13 live cartridges.
Okay. And then we also have another, don't know what's in one of them, but we've got another olanzapine bottle. Is that correct? And some contacts and a flashlight.
Correct.
All right. With regards to processing the scenes, outdoor scene, the vehicles, the building 6, and then the defendant's apartment, does that pretty much give a good overview of what was taken and what was found in those places.
Yes, sir.
And as you testified to the jury, the firearms evidence, you collect that in a manner at which it can be sent to firearms examiners, and then they can review those things. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Ranger. I'll pass the witness at this time.
Okay, so Ranger Simmons, you got called out from Greenville at like 2:45 or 3 in the morning on the 29th of March, 2019. Is that right?
No, sir, in the afternoon.
In the afternoon?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And so you had to, were you at home or were you on duty?
No, I was on duty at my office.
So you had to go home and change to more appropriate clothes, then you had to drive to Garland to get that scanner.
Correct.
And you had to drive back to Frisco.
Yes, sir.
That must have taken at least 2 hours to do all that.
Yes, sir. I think I arrived around 4:30 maybe.
And then you had to, so you got there at 4:30, and they didn't clear the scene until the defendant surrendered at 5 or 6 in the morning, so you were standing around for 12 hours.
Yes, sir.
All right. And you had your whole evidence team with you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, so then you got to work and did the work that we have just heard described here. How long did it take to comb through this area, make all these photographs, assign the different exhibit designations?
We started picking up inside the apartment around 12:10 p.m., and then I think we finished close to 1 p.m. We had done the outside scene first, and then...
Well, I mean, from the time you started, they secured the scene at 6 in the morning.
Yes.
And it took you till 1:10 p.m. to finish all of what we've just seen you describe.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, I want to just focus in for a minute on some of those photos that we saw just now, exhibits 283, 333, and 317, or maybe we should take them in order, 283, 317, and 333. If you would, that would be very helpful. Thank you, sir. Oops. Two 283, 317, and 333. All right, so in 283, we see on the wall next to that window some things on the wall high on either side of the window that the prosecutor described as placards. One of them looks like an ad for Shiner beer, and the other one looks like an ad for some other kind of beer. And those are shown in another picture too, or at least the Shiner one is. What is behind, if anything is behind, those beer signs?
I don't believe there's anything behind the beer signs. There were some stickers on the wall when he had focused in that we had put on the wall by defects.
Right, stickers showing defects in the wall.
Yes, and that's what we call a placard.
All right.
Would be the stickers, not the items that were already on the wall.
All right. And then in 317, all right, now that's a picture of the ceiling in the bathroom, right?
Yes.
And what that picture appears to focus in on is a bunch of duct tape over either an air conditioning vent or a heating vent or something there in the bathroom.
Yes, sir.
Did you take that tape off to actually see what was under there?
I did not, but one of the other rangers may have.
All right. And what significance to you, if any significance, did the taping over of a heating or air conditioning duct have?
It just seemed out of place.
Seemed odd, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then let's move over to 333. Now that's taken to show 3 more defects in the wall, and you've got your label, actually 4 of them, you've got your labels pasted over that. But I want you to look at the electrical outlet that's down on the left. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
What's plugged into that top receptacle?
I do not know, sir.
All right. So since you don't know, it's hard to say what significance it has, if it has any significance.
Yes. I believe it was mainly focused on the 4 defects.
Yeah, I mean, the picture was taken to show the defects. It just happened to capture the receptacle.
Yes.
But what's there and why that's there, you don't know, right?
Correct.
All right. Now, you also showed another photograph, and I'm sure the jury will remember. We don't need to look at it again. You took a picture inside the refrigerator, and there were 2 knives in the crisper. You remember that?
They were on a shelf, yes.
Did that seem odd to you to find knives inside the refrigerator?
Yes, sir.
All right. I mean, you told me you've been a ranger for 14 years. You've been in DPS as a trooper and then as a sergeant. You've got a long career with the Department of Public Safety. How many different crime scenes have you examined, you reckon, in your career?
In the Rangers, probably close to 200.
Ever seen knives inside a refrigerator before?
Not that I can recall.
Just seems quite odd, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
Did it seem like there sure were a lot of those different bottles of olanzapine, and the prosecutor showed you many pictures of them, right?
Yes, sir.
They all had medicine inside them, right?
Yes, sir. They all appeared to be full.
And you know, so I mean, normally people get their prescription and they take their medicine, and then the bottle's empty and they throw it away, right?
I would hope so. Yes.
And I mean, they throw the empty bottle away. So what did it indicate to you that you found so many bottles of olanzapine that were full?
That he hadn't been taking the medication.
And nevertheless, it had been filled, regularly filled and collected.
Yes.
Right. Second, Your Honor. All right, just a couple more questions and we'll be done. There are a number of photographs of the front door of the apartment, both from the outside and from the inside, right?
Yes, sir.
And you can kind of tell because the outside of the door is painted like a deep red and the inside is painted white.
Yes, sir, I believe so.
And down the middle of that front door, there's like a channel, a big, huge dent. That's where the breaching charge was placed, right?
Yes, sir, for what I've been told.
That's what blew the door open.
I believe so, yes.
And the inside of that door, on each side of the door, there was a metal bracket. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the bracket was about the size of the cross-section of a 2x4.
I don't remember the size, but...
And those brackets were bolted to the wall.
Yes.
And the way the door was secured was a 2x4 would be slid through the brackets across the door, right?
It wasn't that way when we got there, but...
Well, right, because because they'd blown up a charge to knock the door open, right?
Correct.
I mean, and you see the one end of that 2x4 splintered from the force of the explosion,
Yes.
right? So anyone who wanted to construct such a device on their front door, it'd take some planning. It's not something you could do in 5 or 10 minutes. It'd be an afternoon's work anyway, right?
Correct.
It would have to have been prepared in advance, and no telling how far in advance.
Correct.
All right. Thank you, Ranger Simmons. No further questions, Your Honor.
I believe so. Yes.
I'm going to show you. $115. There it is. 115 through 144. You've previously looked at those as items that you took out of the apartment, the ones we've seen pictures of. Is that correct?
Correct.
And we'll, just for the record, Judge, we'll offer that evidence at this time.
We don't have any objection to any of those exhibits.
115 through 144?
Yes, Your Honor.
They're admitted.
All right. That's all I have for the Ranger.
Nothing further for the Ranger, and she is excused.
All right, thank you. You're free to stay or go, whatever you'd like to do. Take a 5-minute break. Members of the jury, I'm going to confer with the attorneys and see where we're at. I may bring you all back in for one more witness, or I may call it for the day. The bailiff will let you know.
All right.
Seated. Mr. Mitchell, can you tell me how many witnesses you have remaining for your case?
Judge, we just have one witness left that we planned on putting on today. It's Firearms, and I believe, one, I believe we can get him on pretty quick, and two, that would put us right where our mark was to try to get through today.
All right, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll hear from the last witness.
Not opening.
Will you get Philip so that he can come look at this stuff and just make sure we're looking for states? Want it, like any of these lists? Numbers. Everything's marked. Hey, David, I'm going to be entering gun and 104 condition witness that's coming up. So just want to... So if you want to come up, I want to make sure that you're comfortable with it. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming you probably don't need to enter to open everything, but if you want to look at this stuff and make sure. What I like to do is not have to on doing what we talked about, just saying, I'm going to show you a state this. Be able to compare these to that. How many? The 111. Or, I'm not missing those stuff. Okay. However you want. You want to do it, man. You want to do that now? That way. 142.
Good afternoon. Is this the witness? Sir, can you raise your right hand for me? Do you swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Have a seat. In the jury.
The report.
Be seated. State, call your next witness. This witness has been sworn.
Hi, my name is Philip Duong. Last name is spelled D-U-O-N-G. I'm a firearms and tool marks examiner for the Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Laboratory. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry from Texas Wesleyan University. And from there, it's a 1.5-year training program through our department. And during that training program, we're reading books and articles pertaining to the science. We're also looking at thousands of fired cartridge cases and bullets. On top of that, we learn about the functionality of a firearm. We go through armor school to learn how to take apart certain firearms and put them back together and what each part does. We learn about serial number restoration, tool marks examination, and we have competency and proficiency tested. And from there, we have mock trial training as well, followed by supervised casework. And once that's complete, we're signed off for independent casework.
And with regards to your work in firearms examination, tool mark examination, is it possible to take evidence found at a crime scene, such as cartridge casings or fired bullets, and go back and compare those for inclusion or exclusion with regards to a particular firearm?
Yes, it is possible.
Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how that is accomplished?
Sure. So when we look at fired evidence, we're looking at fired cartridge cases and fired bullets. And what we're looking at in particular is the surfaces of these items where they come in contact with the firearm. So what we're looking at is individual characteristics. And what individual characteristics are these marks produced by these random imperfection and irregularities of the tool surface. So as a bullet passes through a firearm, the firearm leaves these small individual marks on the bullet. And same with the cartridge case, as it's fired in a firearm, the point of contact that it comes in contact with also leave these microscopic marks.
And are those markings unique to that firearm, and as cartridges are fired, bullets pass through, you're able to microscopically compare those?
Yes, these marks, these individual characteristics are unique to a very specific tool, in this case, a firearm.
And in this case, were you asked to do that with evidence gathered by the Texas Rangers in an offense in Frisco, Texas?
Yes, I was.
Now, when you're asked to process and examine firearms evidence, does your lab assign a unique number to that?
Yes, we do.
And was a number assigned in this case?
Yes.
You would. What was that number?
It is GAR 1904 05948.
I don't know if you could do this for us, but do you have any idea about how many different pieces of evidence you were sent to examine on this one?
I don't have a particular number on this case, but it was quite a few.
It was a lot. Is that fair? Okay. Can you at least tell us, look, I had this many firearms that I was asked to look at?
Your Honor, may I look at my notes?
Yes.
In total, there was 7 firearms that were submitted for analysis.
One of those firearms being a Sig Sauer Texas Department of Public Safety issued 9mm, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. If we take that one out, another one was a Bushmaster 223, also as far as the evidence sent to you, noted to be belonging to a Michael Herring DPS trooper, is that correct?
That is correct.
We take that one out. And then finally, a 9mm Beretta Nano.
Correct.
Okay. We take that one out.
Okay.
So we've got 4 firearms, is that correct? Left?
That is correct.
Okay. Were you asked to examine a Maverick 12-gauge shotgun?
Yes, I was.
Were you asked to examine a Glock 23? 40 caliber.
Yes, I was.
Were you asked to examine a Taurus PT 111, 9mm?
Yes, I was.
Were you asked to examine a Taurus PT 609, 9mm?
Yes.
Yes.
Show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 145.
Okay.
Is this the Taurus PT 609 you examined?
Yes, I was.
But we're going to offer State's 145 at this time, under Rule 104, subject to another witness making it relevant.
I note the offer, and I have no objection.
145.
145 is admitted subject to that.
Instead of going piece by piece, what I'd like to do is ask you this. Were you able to make comparisons to cartridge cases, bullets, shotgun shells, and examine those compared to the weapons we just discussed?
Yes, I was.
And were you able to make conclusions, either including, excluding, or not, or, inconclusive with regards to that ammunition evidence?
Yes, I was.
And did you put those findings into a report?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as 356, State's Exhibit number 356, and ask you if that's a true and correct copy of that report.
Yes, it is.
We will offer State's Exhibit 356 at this time.
Objection to 356.
States 356 is admitted.
Sir, if you would, what I'd like to do, and again, I said, instead of going through all of that, can you do this for me? Can we go weapon by weapon that we just described, those 4 weapons, and can you tell me how many cartridge cases or shot shell? What do you call a fired shot shell?
Shot shell.
All right, fired shot shells. You attributed to those weapons.
Okay, so you just want the number, you don't want item number or anything?
I may ask you for one in particular, but let's start here. With regards to the Maverick 12-gauge shotgun.
Okay.
How many fired shot shells were you able to attribute to that shotgun?
I was able to identify 5 shot shells to that particular shotgun.
And as we go through this, we need to be careful about what we say evidence shows us. Is that fair? We don't want to overstate what we know or don't know based on evidence, correct? Here's what I mean by that.
Okay.
If I tell you I've got 5 shot shells that have been fired out of a shotgun, does that mean that I've only fired 5 times?
No, what that means was these 5 shot shells were the only ones that I saw that was identified.
So what I mean is we don't want to, all we can say for sure is 5 rounds, 5 shotgun shells have been through that gun and we found those, right?
Correct. For sure, 5 shot shells were fired from this shotgun.
Exactly. There may have been more, but there's certainly not less. We know that we've got 5. Okay, all right. So we've got 5 shot shell that have been identified as cycled through that Maverick 12-gauge. So we know that the shotgun was fired 5 times, correct?
It has been fired, correct.
All right. Let's move to the Glock 23, the 40 cal.
Okay.
How many cartridge cases were identified to have been cycled through the Glock?
Total of 12 cartridge cases were identified as having been fired in that Glock.
With regards to the Taurus PT-111,
Total of 8 cartridge cases was identified in that pistol.
Now, in that pistol, was one of the cartridge cases that you found that you were able to match to that PT-111, was that given to you as an agency number 59?
All the agency numbers in my submission form indicates a 5 numerical.
Okay, that's all right. And then the Taurus PT-609, how many cartridge casings were attributed to that weapon?
A total of 9 cartridge cases were identified in that Taurus pistol.
So just to summarize, to make sure I'm sure that I understand what it is we're saying here. 5 shot shells fired out of the Maverick 12 shotgun.
Correct.
12 cartridge cases fired out of the Glock 23.
That's correct.
8 cartridge cases fired out of the Taurus PT-111.
Correct.
And 9 cases fired out of the PT-609 9mm.
Correct, 9 cartridge cases.
Judge, at this time, we will offer states 357 through 360 under 902 with the seal of the United States of America presented on them.
You don't have any objection to any of these exhibits?
357 through 360 are admitted.
Judge, may I have access to the
Almo.
Almo? Permission to publish states 357, 360, Judge. Ladies and gentlemen, State's Exhibit 357 is under seal from the United States of America Department of Justice, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms. Contained within the firearms trace summary, whereby Maverick Arms Model 88 12-gauge shotgun purchased by Bryan Matthew Cahill at an address of 4607 Timber Glen Road, apartment 726. Academy Sports and Outdoors. Purchase date July 6th, 2013. States 358, again bearing the seal of the United States of America Department of Justice. Firearms trace summary for a Glock 23 .40 caliber to a George Howard Cahill, Mike's Gun Room, purchase date 12/17/2013. States Exhibit 359, bearing the seal of the United States of America Department of Justice, ATF. Shows a Taurus PT-111 9mm, purchased by Bryan Matthew Cahill on March 2nd, 2016 from Academy Sports and Outdoors. States Exhibit 360, bearing the seal of the United States of America Department of Justice, ATF. Taurus PT-609 9mm, purchased by Bryan Matthew Cahill, December 27th, 2013, Academy Sports and Outdoors. I have no further questions, Judge. I'll pass the witness.
So, Mr. Duong, let's talk a little bit about tool marks, examining and how you get that done.
Sir?
So there were a total of 7 weapons you examined connected with this case, right?
That's correct, sir.
And so one of them is a rifle, one of them is a shotgun, the other 5 were pistols, right?
The other 4 were pistols.
4 were pistols, excuse me. Getting a damn counting wrong. All right, so all of these pistols are what we call semi-automatic pistols, right?
Yes.
Right. So the way tool marks, and when we're talking about ammunition, tool marks get left on the cartridge casing and on the actual projectile, right?
That's correct, sir.
But you've been testifying today just about the markings left on the cartridge casing. Did you do any work with projectiles in this case?
I did.
All right,
sir.
But you haven't been asked about any of that, and this afternoon we're just talking about the work you did on cartridge casings, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, you and I know what we mean by a cartridge casing, but maybe the jury doesn't, right? So when we think about the cartridge for a semi-automatic pistol, we'd have to say it kind of has 4 parts, right?
Sure.
All right, so the cartridge casing that you're examining is a little metal tube closed at one end, right?
So a cartridge case is a cup that holds the powder and the projectile. Correct, it is open on one end, and on the other end, what seats is a primer, which causes ignition that burns through the propellant that causes the projectile to combust.
All right, so as usual, you're explaining it better than me. So the 4 parts are, you've got the projectile, which some people might call the bullet, right?
Yes, sir.
And you've got the casing, which is the metal container that holds the propellant, right?
Yes, sir.
And when we say propellant, a lot of people might call that gunpowder, right?
That is correct.
And some people might also loosely call the cartridge casing a shell, right?
That is correct.
And then in the base of the cartridge case, there's a little metal piece called a primer, right?
Yes, sir.
So when the weapon is loaded, the cartridge is inside the chamber, right?
That is correct.
The person who wants to fire it pulls the trigger, right?
Correct.
That causes the firing pin, propelled by spring-loaded energy, to hit the primer, right?
That is correct.
The primer explodes because of that strike from the firing pin.
Sure.
The explosion of the primer ignites the powder inside the cartridge.
Correct.
The powder explodes.
Powder burns at a rapid rate, increasing the pressure.
And then it forces the bullet out of the end of the casing, down the barrel of the weapon, and out the muzzle, right?
That is correct.
And so the first tool mark is left when the firing pin strikes the primer, right?
The first tool mark, depending on, the gun and whatnot, is when it slides up that feed ramp, or let alone the magazine marks. Whenever you load a cartridge into a magazine, there's your first tool mark.
Right.
But during the firing process, correct.
I started us off with the cartridge in the chamber.
Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. So once the cartridge is fired, then there's a recoil from that, right?
Correct.
And the slide of the pistol comes back and it ejects the spent cartridge out a port, right?
That is correct.
And when that happens, the empty cartridge bangs around on the internal parts of the gun, right?
Can you repeat that again, sir?
As the cartridge is ejected out the port, it bangs around on the steel parts inside the gun.
It doesn't necessarily bangs around. So during the firing process, due to all that pressure, that cartridge case will expand and it'll come in contact with the chamber walls. And as it's ejected, it's scraped along the chamber walls and then ejected.
And in the process of all that, little tiny marks are left on the empty cartridge case.
Correct.
And when you find the empty cartridge case later on the ground, wherever it may be, you can put it under a microscope and you can look at it, right?
That is correct.
And you can see those markings.
Correct.
And, but when you've done that, you still don't know what pistol that came from, do you?
Whenever I look at that initial analysis, no, I do not. It's not until I compare it to test fires that were generated from a suspected firearm.
Because you've got to recover the weapon that you think it was fired from, and then you have to fire some cartridges from that weapon that you know you fired there, and then you got to compare the two, right?
That is correct.
And sometimes there's enough markings left on the questioned sample that you're able to compare it and make a comparison and decide they came from the same thing.
Most of the time during the test firing process, it leaves good individual marks that's good for comparison purposes.
But sometimes not.
Depends on the firearm, the state of the weapon, the damage. It just depends.
Right. So you answered the prosecutor's question. You got 5 casings from or 5 spent shot shells from the shotgun, 12 casings from the Glock, 8 casings from the PT-111, 9 cases from the PT-609. How many other casings did you examine that came from those 4 weapons?
In this case, none. Those were the only cartridge cases that were identified to those specific firearms.
And then you did not have any 9mm cartridges, 9mm casings, 40 caliber casings, or shot shell casings that were not matched up to one of these 4 weapons.
The other fired cartridge cases were identified to the other submitted firearms that we didn't discuss.
Right. And is it correct? So of those 3 that we didn't talk about, at least 2 of those were issued by the DPS. Is that correct?
I believe so. I don't know.
All right. Is it for ammunition that is issued with DPS weapons? Does it all come from the same source?
No, it varies.
All right. So we cannot tell as a general rule that, okay, here's a Hornady case, therefore that must be a DPS firearm.
Correct. So these ammunition that is used by the department is often sold at your local retail stores, Academy, Dick's, or other gun stores.
Right. And the department doesn't always get all their ammunition from one single source.
I don't know what they're using now, but they typically go through a mass order, and yeah.
Like any other careful steward of the public funds, they can get the ammunition as cheaply as they can.
Again, I don't know the answer to that question.
All right. All right, thank you, Mr. Duong. No further questions, Your Honor.
Is this witness released?
Mr. Duong's excused.
Sir, you are released. You're free to stay or go, whatever you'd like to do. Members of the jury, we are going to recess for the day. Does anyone on the jury have any problems being here and beginning at 8 o'clock? 8:30? 8:30, okay? All right, let's plan on resuming at 8:30 in the morning. Please remember the court's instructions: don't discuss the case or investigate the case. Have a nice evening. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Bye. All right, I do have a draft charge for one of the indictments that we're going to distribute to the attorneys. I'll be working on the other ones. We'll be in recess till tomorrow morning, 8:30.
Sure.
When I was 30. Maybe 16.